Okay, we're live. This is Attorney Vincent Davis, and I have a very special guest tonight, Miss Erin Carranza. Erin, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good. So, tell me, my guests will know about what you're doing. Why don't you explain to us how you're helping people with CPS cases right now?
I was a victim of CPS, false allegations made by my husband, all this other stuff. And I realized that I had um, a really a good a talent for supervised visitation because my daughter's visits were stellar. Each was um, like a themed visit. I would do camping, and so every visit was different. I wanted to make it so it was like a little bubble that she was looking forward to coming to. And then I realized that there was other kids in the rooms that didn't have anything to do, or that there was parents that didn't know what to do because nobody tells you. So while I was in dependency court, I would go room to room, hand out toys, hand out snacks. If there was kids that didn't have a parent show up, they would bring them into my room with us. And then I realized it wasn't just in Fontana; it was all over the place. So I decided to branch out, and now I do the same thing, but I also help them prepare for court, the way to look, not anything legal, but what to wear. Thanks to Mr. Davis, no high heel stilettos. Um, my favorite thing to wear, but um, how to prepare for court, how to speak to the social worker, how to speak to the judge, how to take a deep breath when they're attacking you, like that kind of thing. Nobody told me how to do any of that.
You know, Tiana just posted this comment. She said, I was just about to ask that same question. And I think she was referring to how to dress.
Hmm.
So, why don't you tell them what I advised you several years ago about when you go into court, especially into a CPS case?
So no club wear. And I will say my high heels were not club heels, but so my high heels were very tall. I think the tallest ones were at 5 inches. My stilettos I would wear to court. Vince said nothing more than 3 inches, which I scoffed at, but it's true. So flats, or if you have a high heel, just a little pump on the back. Dress like you're going to church, if that's a good enough reference for you. Um, if don't go in there with like a pot leaf on your t-shirt and a tie-dyed something or other, because whether you know it or not, they are judging you how you look and how you walk in the door. The moment you walk in, they're making their mind up about you, even though they're not supposed to. But as humans, that's just what we do. As soon as we see somebody, blah blah blah. So you want to not dress outlandish. You don't want to be remembered for that lady in the crazy outfit, or that man in the pink velour suit, or whatever the case may be. It's like you're going to church, respectful, because you're in court.
Hmm.
So you have to be respectful. Button down shirt, like a small necklace, nothing flashy. Don't try to show off any bling. Don't try to bring any attention to yourself. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean that's all good advice. I mean, I typically tell people, females white blouse,
Mhm.
dark blue pantsuit or dark gray pantsuit.
Mhm.
Um, and here's one thing that I tell people all the time, and there's I think, psychological studies about this. Um, Pull your hair back out of your face. You see the way Aaron's hair is right now? If we were going to court, I'd probably advise Erin to put her hair back in a ponytail. Yeah, like that. So that none of her hair is covering or, hiding her face. So that, when you look at you or when the judge looks at you, the impression that he or she may have is going to be one of openness, one of credibility, one of trustworthiness.
You're not
So these are
hiding anything.
right. So these are things that are important when you're in court.
Mhm.
Now, Aaron, one of the things I want you to do this evening for us as our guest is I want you to ask me questions that hopefully I can answer. And by the way, Can you see the comments that are being posted on the different
I
social
just
media?
clicked over to the comment section, so now I can see them. Yes.
Okay. So, and the questions you may ask me may come from those comment sections.
Okay.
We're on I think a total of 8 social media platforms simultaneously live streaming. So, there are people posting that we can see from all of these different platforms. So, Aaron, you can
Okay.
use those questions or you can use your own questions, but
Okay.
go ahead.
So I have a lot of questions because I am currently suing the county myself. I've sent Mr. Davis a bunch of s- sentences that I had written down. So I guess since it's fresh on my brain and there's parents that are wondering, how do you get a caseworker to be held accountable? How do you get a judge to be held accountable for misrepresentations or just flat out lying? That happened all in my case. So, and I know that happens in most cases where they lie or misrepresent the truth. Is there a form that they can fill out? Is there a motion that they can file?
Well, that's a very complex question. And I'm going to divide it in two. You ask for social workers and then
Mhm.
judges.
I
Totally
don't know if it all
different.
is it all under the same thing or is like judges
No,
and social workers
no,
different?
no. Remember from your civics class in high school, judges are part of the judiciary,
Hmm.
either in that state or, the
Hmm.
federal government, if it was a federal judge. But in CPS cases, it's always a state judge. So that's separate from the legislative branch and separate from the executive branch, right?
Hmm.
So social workers are part of the executive branch of the government. So if you're going to complain about an executive branch of the government, that's totally different from the judicial branch, right?
Mhm,
And the legislative branch would be, your state legislature or your county board of supervisors or your city council, that type of thing. So when you make a complaint, you got to go to the right place for your complaint to be worked on.
so,
So
like,
if you
the DHSS, Department of Health and Human Services? Oh, there, that's what I was gonna ask you.
well, that's something totally different. Um, I don't know if it was you and I talking about this, maybe not. I was just talking to someone about this. One of the first things that I do is I tell people if you want to make a complaint because you think your social worker has done something inappropriate, the
Mhm,
first place you should make the complaint to is the Department of Health and Human Services. Now you can
in
just Google
Washington, right?
Washington, D.C.
That was my
You
question. What's the difference between your local one and the one in DC?
Um, well, not all places have a local office. DHS doesn't have a local office. Now, where
Okay,
we live in Southern California, there is a local office, but the complaint should, in my opinion, be filed with the main office.
mhm,
It's not required, but it's just something that I think would be better off for you to get some type of action. I was just talking about this on the show last night. I was talking about this. So that's the first place you should make it. And the reason why I say that is because all CPS cases nationwide are controlled monetarily and by regulations from the Department of Health and Human Services.
mhm,
It's interesting because the rules the department makes aren't elected. These rules aren't made by elected officials. They're made by people that work for the Department of Health and Human Services. However, in the past, in my opinion, my humble opinion, they have been responsive to launching investigations and trying to right wrongs that happen at the local level. So
mhm,
that's the first place that I think you should make a complaint. The second place I think you should make the complaint is at the state level. In California, you can make a complaint with the Department of Social Services in Sacramento. Now,
mhm,
for all of the viewers, I know that you're not all from California, but find out where the head of the Department of Social Services or the like agency in your state is located. They will have a complaint format. And it probably will be online, or you can just call the 800 number and find out. The same is true for the federal complaint with DHHS. So
well,
those are the
now, the California has the Community Care Board, and that's for the foster to
yeah,
complain
that's
about the
something
foster home?
yeah, that's something totally different.
Okay, so it's not part of those 2. Okay.
No. One of the things, and that's an interesting comment that you just made. You want to make sure that when you're dealing with these CPS cases, that you're addressing the right agencies. Now, you
Mhm,
just brought up community care licensing. That has to do with foster homes, group homes, and the
mhm.
such. And those are the people in California that govern and regulate foster parents.
Right.
Now, granted, many of you out there may have complaints about the foster parent taking care of your child. And, that's maybe one of the places that you want to go first and make a complaint. But
Mhm.
right now, Aaron, I'm only talking about complaining against social workers.
Right, so I wanted to make sure that there's that distinction because with me, when I first started, I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna complain to whoever I can get their ear," and it didn't work.
Right. And
My
it's not
complaints went nowhere.
right. It's not going to work
Mhm.
because if you're not in the right place, knocking on the right door, people are just going to ignore you because it's
Right,
not their job.
right,
If you go to community care licensing complaining about a social worker, it's going to be, look, you're in the wrong place. Don't bother me.
right.
A good, I don't know if this is a good analogy, but let's say your house is burning down and you call, the local electric company.
Mhm.
They don't have anything to do with fires at your house.
Right.
Try to call the fire department, right?
Yeah.
Or, a better example, I think, would, the bank's being robbed and you call the paramedics.
Mhm.
You're in the wrong place.
Right.
Paramedics, they're not going to be interested in that. So you got to call the police, got to call the FBI. So you have to know who to make your complaint to. And a lot of people just think, oh, I'll just call somebody in the government
Yeah.
and something will be done.
No.
Not true. Not true.
No,
So
I found that out the hard way. But, yeah, so for that's for foster homes, so strictly for your social worker, you want to complain to DHS?
no, you want, the Department of Health and Human
Yes,
Services,
yes, HSS.
DHHS,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
All right. And then your local social services agency in your state, not
Mhm,
within your county.
mhm.
Okay. All right. And by the way,
Um,
so Brianna Khan said, "Hi, Mr. Davis. I would like to make an announcement for parents here. I, Brianna Janae Khan, started uh, Parental Rights Matter LLC in California. Brianna, send me an email and maybe we can have you as a guest on this week coming up. We can talk about your organization."
I see another comment that says, "Mr. Davis, who and how will I start a complete complaint and start my appeal civil rights?" So, I know that that's more than one thing. And
Right.
I find that out now, now that I'm actually doing it. So I'm suing the department, but I'm also suing the therapist, but that's not on the same level. That's federal and state. It's not just one big lump of a thing. And if you can get an attorney, get an attorney. Don't do this without an attorney,
You know,
honestly.
it's interesting that you should say that because now you are actually trying to do this by yourself,
That's why I
and it's
said get an attorney.
right, and it's incredibly hard and complex.
It's
And
very hard.
Erin sent me some stuff today to look over for her, and I was looking at it, and the first thing I can thought of was she has a lot of different concepts intermingled with each other.
Hmm.
So here's one of the things I was going to tell you. I didn't tell you this before the show tonight. In your lawsuit, you have listed as a plaintiff yourself, which is
Hmm.
right, but you also have listed your daughter.
Hmm.
Now, your daughter may have a case against the social workers, but at
Hmm.
this point in time, you shouldn't bring it. And there's a
Oh.
lot of strategic reasons for that. Now, you can bring it,
Hmm.
but it's just going to complicate your case. And your
Right.
daughter has a longer time in California to sue than you do, right? She has until she's 20,
I have
right?
2 weeks.
Okay, but the 2 week date is for you alone,
Yes,
right?
just for me. Yeah.
Right. So
Oh,
you want to
that was
file
another
something.
question.
You
Can I
what you
file
want to
a shell complaint and hold the statute, or can I not? I have to.
You can. You
Okay.
can. but it has to be a little bit more than a shell, right?
Okay.
It has to be, state something substantive to save the statute. But that will only save the statute temporarily. You're going to have to make that, correct
Mhm.
that and make it a final thing before you serve it on the defendants.
No, when you're suing the government, do you have to send them an intent to sue letter?
No, what you're referring to is in the government code, and I think it's like this in most states. I don't know, but in
Mhm,
California, if you're going to bring what's called a state cause of action,
mhm,
you have to file a notice with that particular governmental agency that you are going to sue them. And
mhm.
they get a chance to investigate before you sue. And once they deny your claim for millions of dollars, uh, then you have the right to sue subsequently. I think it's 6 months or something like that. However, and this is an important part, if you're going to sue them under federal law, all right, you don't have to give them that notice. So most of the cases that I file are
Mhm,
just under the federal civil rights law, 42 USC 1983,
mhm.
and I don't have to give them any particular notice or warning. I just file the lawsuit and serve it on them.
I will another big thing that my clients don't know about and a lot of people don't know about and I didn't know about until you told me and how important they are is your delivered service logs. There is exculpatory evidence in there. There's all kinds of stuff in there that you don't know about. So if you could explain what those are to
Sure.
and get
So
and why to get them.
so they used to be called or referred to in Los Angeles County as the Title 20s. The real name of the document is delivered service logs. And all delivered service logs are the diary that the social workers who work on your case must keep. These computerized diaries are sent to the state and the head of the state and to the federal government, because the federal government actually conducts audits on these cases to see if the social workers are working these cases the right way, and to see if the federal money that they're getting for these cases is justified.
Mhm,
So you want to, during your case, get copies of the delivered service logs, the diaries. I'll tell you something funny. When I was a young attorney, I was on a case, and this was at this time. Actually, it's still kind of unusual. I did the underlying case in the juvenile court, the CPS court, and I was able to get parents back their child.
mhm,
During that case, I requested the Title 20s or the delivered service logs, and I got all of the Title 20s and delivered service logs. Case is over. We sue the county and the social worker, and I request a copy of the delivered service logs again
mhm,
from the civil attorneys that were representing the county and the social workers.
mhm.
And I went to a deposition, and they were supposed to produce the delivered service logs. Now, the odd thing was, and I didn't plan it like this, it just happened. I already had the delivered service logs, so when they turned them over, I'm expecting to see what I already have. Well, I was given something 180 degrees different. What I had was something handwritten. In the old days, they were handwritten,
Mhm.
and they typed out these delivered service logs that were completely different. I mean, certain incidences were, characterized differently. And I'm not talking just about a little bit, you know,
So what do you do? What were you just like, hello?
no, I didn't. I didn't let on. I started asking questions, and with the new stuff, and I would be referring to my old stuff too. And they didn't know that I had the old stuff, because it's very unusual to have an attorney who does both of the cases,
Mhm,
right? I just happened to be an attorney that would do both of those types of cases, and I just had the evidence. Interesting thing, that case resolved, as you might imagine,
mhm.
because there was something funny going on with the record keeping. The other thing is, I want to tell you this. Delivered service logs now by law are computerized and they're sent immediately to the federal government. So if you want to get a copy of the delivered service logs from the county and get a copy of the delivered service logs from the federal government, sometimes they don't match up, you know,
Mhm.
and the people defending the social workers, um, I don't know if they realize this or not, that social workers sometimes change information.
Mhm.
And if you get if you have a computer expert also, you can look at the computer records, and they will show if a social worker went back and changed something,
Right.
you know,
When
because
they're
the
sitting
rule.
there on their phones, they're not on their phones, guys. They are literally typing down literally everything that you are doing during your visit. They're not texting, they're not playing games. No, they're detailing what you're wearing, what your kid's wearing, how they interact. I think, reunification is the most important part of your case because that's where they're deciding if they're going to give you your child back or not. So, like, when you see them typing, that's the part of your delivered service logs. That's your whole visit. They type down like in incredible detail.
So the, getting your delivered service logs in your CPS case, and then again in your lawsuit, is extremely important. It might be something that you might be surprised about, that there's substantially different. And these diaries, the rule is, at least in California, in all counties that I've come across, and I've done a lot of cases in a lot of different counties, if it's not written by the social worker in the delivered service log, it didn't happen. Now, a lot of CPS judges don't go by that rule. I recently did a case where I was cross examining a social worker, and I asked her, "Hey, what happened when?" And she gave me an answer, and I said, "Well, interesting thing is, that's not in your delivered service logs." And she said something to the effect of, "You're right, it's not in there." And she was surprised because they had turned over the logs, that I had even read them, right? Who reads delivered service logs? Anyway, I asked her that, and I said, "Well, isn't it the rule that
Uh-huh.
you if you don't write it in the delivered service logs, that it didn't happen?" And she said, "Yeah, that is the rule. And, if something happened, I should have written it down."
Right.
And then the judge made a comment, something like, "I don't care about what the rules are about delivered service logs. I only want to know what the truth is." And the interesting thing was, this social worker was testifying about something, that happened, maybe a year ago.
Hmm.
And for her to remember something like that without having written it down, I was, kind of surprised. And then when she said, "Well, it didn't happen if I didn't write it down," and then the judge goes, "Well, I don't care. What's the truth?" And
This the
it,
same lady that you got in trouble, got promoted for lying
no,
on the stand?
no,
No, different,
no,
different one.
no, no, that's a whole nother story, about a social worker not telling the truth under penalty of perjury. Um, so, does that ever happen? Yeah, it happens. So, I was explaining this to someone the other day. I said, most people that come to me or call me have a problem with CPS and CPS social workers. And that's a small percentage of the cases. Many cases are out there that people never call me
Hmm.
because they don't have a problem with the social worker,
Hmm.
right? But having problems with social workers and claiming that social workers are not telling the truth, or claiming that they are corrupt, that happens in a smaller percentage of the cases, but it does happen. In
Hmm.
my opinion, it does happen. I've seen it. I've heard it. You know, um, I think it happens more than people realize. Sometimes it's de minimis. It doesn't matter in the case, but it happens a lot, and it's
Hmm.
unfortunate. But I guess people are people, and sometimes they don't.
It was a
And
popularity contest, as I can tell. They just didn't like me right off the bat. It's like I have this effect on people. You either like me right away or you don't. You really don't like me. I don't know what it is, but I'm noticing that with the judge, my family court case right now. It's like there's no reason. in my mind for him to be behaving this way, except for he just doesn't like me. And I'm feeling like, this is not high school. You have our children, you're taking your children. But there's nothing really we can do to stop that. They don't like you, they don't like you. Just don't cuss out your social worker like I did. And
That's good.
then
That's good advice.
and then another bit of advice I have for you that Vince always does is when you're talking, talk nice and calm and lower than normal because it makes people listen to you. Instead of yelling and screaming and, acting a fool hollering, speak softer and milder. Take a breath when you are about to answer a question, because that makes people listen.
Do you, I forgot what we were talking about before, but any other questions you see in the chat?
Let's see. What are Brianna says each party must have and received a copy of such documents. So, like Vince said, your attorney has to subpoena the delivered service logs. As a parent, you don't get to see them. I didn't get to see them. My attorney got to see them because there's, communication with the other parents, council, minors council, county council, all in there. So I wasn't able to sit and look at it. But
I do recall that you telling me that about your case,
mhm.
and I thought that was odd. I have never, in any of my cases, been told my client can't see the delivered service logs because the way I view it is, look, my client is a part of this case,
Mhm.
and I don't know of any rule. Now, there
Well, this
might
was
be,
in
I don't,
dependency court. Now that I'm
yeah.
out of dependency court and suing, now I can look at them. But if you're in dependency court and you want your just delivered service logs to say to file a 388 or whatever thing, Mr. Davis suggests, they won't let you look at it as a parent.
I
Your
don't think
attorney
that's
can.
I don't think that that's proper. I've
Well,
never heard that rule.
you would think that you should be given all of the
Right,
information to best defend yourself, but then
right.
that's logic, and we all know that logic does not apply in the courtroom. So I stopped using logic and just go through what might be weird. But yeah, so that's what and my public defender was fantastic, guys. She really was very good. So I don't doubt that. I don't think she was lying to me about anything. At first, her and I bumped heads, but she's really, I'm grateful for her. But so that's what, just in case, I mean, maybe it was just in San Bernardino, and they're called the 262 notes in San Bernardino County.
So here, Brianna is asking a question.
Hmm.
Mr. Davis, what about when FRS were originally court ordered for the minor and instead fast tracked to the 366 hearing, bypassing to the TPR? So I think she means FRS, Family Reunification Services, but I don't understand the question. Brianna, if you want to post a follow up on that.
Did she say
If
that they skipped all her stuff and went straight to the TPR?
Yeah, and that there is a provision in the law to allow for that under certain conditions. Um, Mainly, if you had a prior CPS case and you lost custody of the child
Hmm.
in your subsequent CPS case, they can argue under certain laws that you shouldn't be giving family reunification services and they should go straight to the TPR, the termination of parental rights. So Brianna also posts, also conflict of interest was associated with the primary social worker. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Can a social worker ever have conflict of interest on your case? Yeah, sure.
Hmm.
Especially if that social worker is somehow involved with the other parent or the someone else on the case, right?
Hmm.
Does that
Yes,
ever does that ever happen, Aaron?
just a little bit.
Yeah.
So
So, there can always
my
be a
my
conflict of
husband
interest.
was a little too friendly with my social worker. So
So, I mean, we don't have any evidence of that, direct evidence. At least I don't, anyway. So I won't say that, but I've heard those allegations made on many cases. I mean,
mhm,
listen. I represented a woman who had a videotape of the social worker and her ex. No, it wasn't even her ex. It was her baby's daddy,
mhm,
who was against her in the case,
mhm,
coming out of a local motel.
mhm,
She had actually videotaped this.
mhm.
she had come to me with the allegations that the social worker was having an affair with her ex, who was against her. And I, of course, thought, right, okay, well, how can you prove
Yeah,
that?
sure.
Right? How can you prove that? And I think before she came to me, she tried to bring it up in court, and they kind of booted her out of court, maybe even laughed her out of
Yeah.
court. And I told her at that time, and I didn't know she was going to do this. I said, "You need some real evidence that I can take to the judge, right?"
Mhm.
And lo and behold, she gets it, and she wins a big lawsuit afterwards against the social worker and the county. The social worker ends up getting fired. Now,
Mhm.
I've seen social workers get caught doing some crazy things. This is the only social worker that I know of that was actually fired for her misconduct.
Well, you
Sometimes,
told me that story about her videotaping, and that's when I went and I decided I was gonna hire a private investigator.
okay. So
So, well, because of your
that's
story,
right. Well, that's a great idea. I mean, you took it to the next level, right?
yeah,
Um,
I had them
yeah,
record me out coming and going outside of the office because the other parent will say you're aggressive,
right.
you know? So you have to document everything, whether it's a conflict of if do you think that the lady in the front office is giving you a dirty look every time you walk in, write it down. Write
By
it
the way,
down, you don't ever know.
who is the private investigator that you use at the current time?
His name is Art Bustamante. He's fantastic. He's all over California. He's been doing this for like 25 years. He's really good. He's a good man. He's understanding and everything. He'll work with you on prices, and he's done CPS cases. He did a lot of work for me, and just because he was outraged by what was happening,
If
so
if
he was
if our viewers
invested.
if the viewers wanted to contact Mr. Bustamante, how would they do that?
Let me find his information for you, and
Okay.
I'll get it up for you in just a second. But his phone number is 714 366 0982. And
I'm gonna post that number in the
mhm,
comments for everyone.
um and I just asked him for his website information.
Okay, and that's
I don't know what
private.
it is yet, so because he just got a new one, so but he does everything. He does CPS. He'll even do your visitations. He will record your visitations. So as long as they're outside, you can record anything. Inside's a different matter. You're not allowed to do that. But
Okay,
um,
very
so as soon
good.
as I get that information, then I'll give it his website and his email. But that's his phone number. So
Okay.
he's really fantastic.
All right, so ask me another question.
Okay, another question is oh, I just lost it because it was all Art Bustamante here. Um, let's see. Oh, so as far as suing goes, I recommend, and I'm assuming you get your child back first because the risk of retaliation. Can you what is retaliation look like for a person who's not had their child back yet? Could
you
they
know,
lose their kid because of retaliation?
oh yeah, oh yeah, definitely. If you believe your civil rights have been violated by a social worker or social workers, one of the things you should do is you should get a consult with an attorney that does civil rights cases against social workers.
Hmm.
Civil rights cases against social workers are different than civil rights cases against police officers or other government actors and officials. So you want to get somebody that, you know, that knows what they're doing.
The whole court
Most,
is different than the other courts, correct? Like
right,
dependency court is completely different than family court,
right,
right?
right. So one of the things that you should do, one of the general strategies that I tell people is consider not filing a lawsuit until you get your child back. It's just interesting how cases turn out when they know you're going to sue them. They start perhaps, or they are able to start sabotaging your case
Mhm.
against you if they know that you're going to sue them.
Right,
So
delivered service logs become very less detailed.
So, you know, keep your cards close to the, your
Mhm,
chest and your strategies.
mhm,
And, first of all, suing a social worker is not an easy thing.
mm-mm,
A lot of people think, you screwed me, you lied about me, I'm just going to sue you. Well, it's not an easy thing to win because social workers, unfortunately, in my opinion, have something called qualified immunity. You just can't sue a social worker for just anything. You have
mhm,
to get over the immunity hurdle.
right,
And if you sue in federal court, you got to get all the jurors on your side and all the jurors thinking that the social worker was negligent. There's a lot of discretion social workers have under the law,
mhm,
and sometimes proving that they actually violated your civil rights maliciously is a difficult thing. It's a
mhm,
difficult thing to do. I mean, it's just, it's not a car accident case,
no,
right? A lot of people call me up and say, "Hey, Davis, I'm in Maine, you're in California. I want you to take my case. And by the way, I don't want to put up any money. You know, you fly
mhm.
back and forth to Maine on your own dime, and they'll settle this case in a few months." That's not accurate at all.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to talk about was, I don't think people understand how expensive it is to actually sue, how expensive it is. People are like, "Why are attorneys so expensive?" Well, if you can explain, not, detailed, but what, like, cost-wise is, for, and then also, just because we're in California, you're in LA County, I'm in San Bernardino County, there's different rules and local rules versus Los Angeles or Riverside County, correct?
Correct. There are different local rules, but the
So you could,
cost,
it's not like going to Maine, you're
no,
it's completely different, but it's still different. So,
right. I was talking to someone today, and they wanted me to represent them in Texas, and
mhm,
I mentioned the travel cost and everything, and the person said, "Well, you don't have to travel. It's all going to be on Zoom." And courts right now, they have been on Zoom, but they're opening it up.
mhm,
And if at any time the court in Texas says, "No, Davis, bring your ass here and appear in front of me," who's going to pay that plane ticket?
right,
Right. So
right,
people don't want to hear that. They want you to take on, they basically want the attorney to finance the case,
right,
right? Because they think that it's going to be resolved in 2 or 3 months.
right.
And it's not true. It's not
And what
true at
is
all.
that called when you're winning? I'll give you 30% of,
A contingency fee.
right.
But
Okay.
what it really means is the attorney finances your case. He provides or she provides all the free labor,
Mhm,
pays all the expenses and costs.
mhm,
I won't mention his name, but there's a very well known attorney. And several years ago, he won a case against the social workers. And before the case went to trial, he had spent over several years, I think the number was $250,000. And basically, if he had not won that case, he would have gone bankrupt. He would have lost his business, his law firm. And at the time, he mentioned to me, I don't know if he does this or not, that he doubted whether he was going to be taking on these cases on a pure contingency fee system because
mhm,
they get so expensive.
mhm,
You got to have experts for this and that. You got to have depositions. You got to have motions, jury fees, court reporting fees. I mean, they add up. It's not
mhm,
like a car accident. Oh, she ran into me at a stoplight.
right.
Hey, that's a lawsuit on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe it's a 3 or a 4.
Mhm,
But these cases on a scale of 1 to 10, they're like 11 and 12s,
mhm,
just in terms of work and complexity. So people get upset all the time because I won't take their case on a contingency fee basis.
mhm.
And that's basically me financing them and their lawsuit.
You
And
wouldn't take my
I don't even,
case.
right, I don't even know them, right?
Right, right, right.
So
It's not personal, people, it's just what it is. Um, Speaking of, paying for the court reporter, I heard, and maybe you can for me, that California will no longer be providing court reporters for family law cases because there's such a shortage that juvenile court and criminal court must have it. So if you want a court reporter, you must pay for it and have them brought in.
Yeah, that's in family law courts, but not in
Right,
CPS or criminal courts.
right. So that's that you still have the court reporter, but in family
That
law.
Yeah, that's always been the rule in civil cases in anyway in Los Angeles County for
Mhm.
years. For years. The family law wasn't included, but now I think it is, and you have to bring your own court reporter or you have to pay for one or something like that.
October 1st. That's what I was told. And my hearings are the 6th, and I'm like, dang it. Because it takes time to get, you have to get they have to be approved, right, by the
Yeah, they have to be
court.
certified court reporter for, superior court cases.
Mm,
And, they're expensive. They can be expensive. You know, justice is expensive and costly. People think, I got screwed by the social worker. I'll get justice by suing them, and it'll be like, snapping my finger and boom, we got the money. It's not like that at all.
explain class action lawsuits because those are really expensive, right?
You know, the notice
Everyone's like, let's do
provision,
one, but it's
right?
expensive.
People tell me that, hey, bring a class action lawsuit. Let me tell you something. When you first start the class action lawsuit, you have to give notice to the class.
Hmm.
Notice means letters, envelopes, postage, printing, stuffing, mailing.
Right.
Now, have you ever tried to send a letter to 100,000 people?
Two.
Right. Imagine what the cost is on that. And it's like, oh, don't
If that's
worry.
just for mailing.
Right. Don't worry. The attorney will take care of that. Attorneys are like people. They don't have a tree with money on it out in the
Right.
backyard. It
I don't
costs
think
money
people
to bring a
realize
class.
that.
No, they don't because they've never got into the nitty gritty. Now, I'll tell you what, you're doing your own lawsuit. You're learning a lot of shit that people don't realize.
Hmm.
And it was funny when you said, if you're going to do a lawsuit, get an attorney
Yeah.
because you're going to spend hours and hours and hours trying to learn something. Then you're going to draw it up. And then you know what you're going to realize after
Don't
it's
need
filed?
it.
No, you did it the wrong way.
Yeah. Oh, that too. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that little
So
piece that I sent you, that took me 7 days. 7 days. Just that little, like, 3 paragraphs took me 7 days to get it. See, if you're not you don't, if you don't, you might have the ingredients, but you don't know how to make the cake properly. It's going to be lopsided. So that's why I said get an attorney. But yeah.
here's Michelle saying, I won an appeal against San Diego County in 2021 and left the state. Can I still file a federal lawsuit?
That's a good
The
question.
answer in terms of time, I believe you still have until 2023 to file a federal lawsuit. But Michelle, that's not the key. The key is if you file a lawsuit, are you likely to win it? That's a
Hmm.
whole nother question.
Hmm.
A whole
Everyone
different
thinks
question.
that just because your case is bad, that it's
Yeah.
suable.
And
It's
and they,
not.
and people don't know anything about what qualified immunity is these social workers enjoy.
Hmm.
So
And judges have lifetime immunity.
I don't know how it's classified, but if you think suing a social worker is hard, suing a judge, I don't even consider it because it's way out there. Now, have I ever heard of cases where judges were sued successfully or sued and it didn't get thrown out? Yeah, I've heard of it.
Hmm.
I've never been personally involved in it, but it's like, you're going to pick the hardest road to get up the mountain.
I'm going to
Yeah.
try to sue a judge.
Good
But
luck.
that's not yet. I got a little bit of time on that one. But so and appeals, that's another good question. So what is something that is that you can appeal and what can you not appeal? Because just because you don't like a ruling or a decision, that doesn't mean that you can appeal it.
Right.
Correct?
So they're appealing the general term. There's two types of appeals in the judicial system. Number one is they call it an appeal, and that's when you have the right, as a matter of law, to file with a higher court to have the trial court's decision examined. But not all decisions by a judge are appealable.
Mhm.
What some decisions and orders that they make, they call them not appealable, and you have to file some type of writ to the higher court. A writ means it's an appeal that they don't have to take and make a decision on.
Mhm.
So sometimes you file a writ and the Court of Appeals just says, hey, you know what? Your writ's denied. We're not even going to consider it because it's just within our discretion.
Mhm.
Some cases that you file an appeal, they have to make a decision, have to make a written decision within a certain amount of time. So you have to decide, what are you doing? Are you filing an appeal or are you filing a writ? They're two
Mhm.
different things. It's night
Right.
and day.
So, talking about TPR hearings, and once your parental rights are removed, it's are you able to get them back, or is that it? Are you able to appeal that and
Yeah.
or
Let's say that you had a 366.26 hearing to
uh-huh.
terminate your parental rights.
Mhm.
Okay. If you lose, your rights are terminated, but you have the right to file an appeal
Mhm.
to try to get that overturned. If you don't get that overturned, your rights remain terminated. And in a lot of cases, not all, but almost all cases, your kids will be adopted by, the foster parent. Maybe the foster parent is a distant relative. Maybe the foster parent is the grandparents. Maybe the foster parent, in a lot of cases, are strangers to you and your family.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, you and your family won't ever see the kids again.
I
So that,
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
so if, is there a chance of getting the children back even after that?
Mhm.
I would say technically yes, but it's such an uphill battle. It's not, a lot of attorneys will just tell you no.
Right.
It's not happening. The truth of it is, you might have a 1% chance of
Mhm.
trying to get that reversed by way of a lawsuit or otherwise. But, that's something you have to take into consideration before you decide to take on that legal battle, because the battle is going to be long, it's going to be complicated, it's going to be expensive.
Now, I heard a rumor floating around, and I don't know if it's true, so I'm gonna ask you because I wanna know too. So can they what if the dad is out of the picture, CPS hasn't contacted him, but he still has parental rights? Can they terminate the mother's parental rights and
Yes.
adopt the child, even though daddy still has parental rights?
Well, what happens is that they will terminate both parents' parental rights. Now, if daddy is not around,
Mhm.
they'll give him notice, and basically, if he doesn't appear,
Mhm.
he'll just be, SOL,
Okay.
and
So they
he
can
can,
just go around terminating people's parental rights?
and they do all the time.
Mhm.
They do all the time.
That's crazy. Because I had a lady whose husband was on a oil rig or something, and they were trying she couldn't get a hold of him. It's like 6 months, and, I was like, "I don't know." She goes, "'Cause I had someone on Facebook I was like, "Well, there's your red flag right there." But I was wondering because if both parents have parental rights, how can they adopt a child out if the father still has parental rights? So that's where my question came from.
His rights were terminated. He just didn't know it.
Okay.
But if
So
you
what
go
happens
to
if that happens? Like, if you come back from the military and you're like, "Oh, you don't have rights anymore." You're like, "Excuse me, I was in Iraq."
Right. The military has something totally different. There's
Mm,
special rules it's called the Soldiers and Sailors Act.
mhm.
They have to go through a whole another process
Okay.
to terminate a guy or gal's rights when they're in the military. But generally speaking, if he's just some regular guy, nobody knows where he is,
Mhm,
they'll require a special type of notice or publication in the
mhm,
newspapers. And if he doesn't show up,
mhm,
his rights are terminated. Now, I have seen on occasion the guy show up later and try to, what they do call a collateral attack.
mhm,
Um, very, very high probability of, not winning that, for a lot of different reasons, but it is
Mhm.
possible. It is possible because your right to notice is a 14th Amendment right under the US Constitution. So you
Right.
have the opportunity for reasonable notice and the opportunity to be heard.
I asked you the other day if you could petition for a writ of habeas corpus to restore custody. Now, would that be something that somebody could do if they've had their TPR hearing and their they've lost their parental rights, or is that something completely different?
A writ of habeas is a very interesting tool in the legal form. Usually it's used to get a criminal conviction overturned.
Hmm.
Okay. Hard to do. Hard to do. You could use it in a CPS manner, all right? But your chances of success are very low,
Hmm.
all right? So, people, online in these different CPS groups will sometimes contact me and say, well, I want to do a writ of habeas corpus.
Hmm.
Like, okay, why did you think that?
Yeah.
Well, why didn't you ever mention it to me? Well, because it's a very low chance of success. It's very
Right.
expensive. To do a writ of habeas corpus to overturn a criminal conviction, might cost you 35, $40,000
Uh-huh.
with a very small chance of success.
Right. So
So,
what are before I forget again, what are suable reasons? Not just because like my daughter's removed without a warrant. That's
okay.
one of them,
So
right?
the main cases I come across are this. There's three main cases for suing a social worker for civil rights violations. Number one, they detained your child without a warrant or court order. That's the
Mhm.
big one. And,
Mhm.
the interesting thing is that social workers still do that, and you know, I don't know what they're thinking or what the training is. There is an
No,
exception that
no
they
training.
have an emergency situation, but they don't have an emergency situation, and they think they can just make up an emergency situation and say, "Oh,
Mhm.
we detained without a court order because it was an emergency," and then
Right.
the court ends up saying, "No, it wasn't an emergency," right?
I have a video of them saying, "We have no safety concerns leaving your daughter here with you," leaving and then removing her without a warrant days later.
Okay.
So, that's not an emergency if I'm understanding it correctly, like, no safety, no safety problems, right? They should have
Mhm.
taken her. I guess what I'm saying is if there was a concern, they should have taken her right there and then, not days later, correct?
Correct. Now, the second reason for suing a social worker generally is
Mhm.
the social worker lied in court, in testimony, or in reports to the court. They might say, Aaron Carranza had red hair when she clearly has blonde hair. You know, and
Mhm.
I have been involved in cases where things like that were said that were clearly incorrect. And there's a
Mhm.
famous one where a social worker wrote in a report that she's talked to a minor's therapist before she detained the child, and that the minor's therapist was in agreement with the child being detained, and this was before a juvenile dependency case ever started.
Mhm.
And my client kept telling me, Vince, that never happened. I can assure you, she never spoke to the minor's therapist.
Mhm.
And so I call up the therapist thinking, my client must be incorrect
Right.
because no social worker would be stupid enough to lie about this in writing and testify to it in court.
Right.
I call up the therapist, I introduce myself, and I said, "Oh, have you ever met social worker so and so? You know, Jane Doe."
Mhm.
"No, never met her." I said, "Well, you must have talked to her, right, on the telephone?" "No, never talked to her."
Mhm.
I said, "You must have communicated in some way, fax, email, text. You talked to her, right?"
Mhm.
She said, "Mr. Davis, I've never talked to that person. I've never met that person."
Mhm.
I said, "Well, would you be surprised that she's written in the report that she talked to you before detaining the child from the mother and that you agreed with that?" She
Mhm.
goes, "I'd be very surprised because it wasn't true." Now,
Um, that happens
here's
a lot.
no, now here's the most interesting thing about this. Social worker comes into court and testifies that, yeah, she talked to the social worker. I mean, she talked to the therapist.
Mhm.
The therapist gets on the stand and says, "No, that's not true. I never talked to her." In the decision by the judge in that case, the judge never really addresses the conflicting testimony about this.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that he should have. But the decision that was made led me to believe that he believed the social worker and not the therapist.
No.
Now, don't forget, I said he never said which one he believed.
I know, but you have a
Okay.
pretty you are an empath and you know what's happening in the courtroom. You can just kind of get a feeling if you pay attention. So, that's another thing is do judges always side with the social workers?
No.
And why is there
Yeah,
a 6-month waiting period
for what?
between why do they keep 6-month extension and keep working and completing a case plan? So why is
That,
there before
that's
your
that's just what the answer to that question is. That's just the law. If you
okay.
read the statutes that control CPS cases, especially in California, it's very, very organized. Now, here's the problem. A lot of the laws we don't agree with, but that's the law.
Mhm.
Like you go on green, you stop on red. That's just the law.
Mhm.
10 yards is a first down in football, right? If you hit a baseball over the fence, that's a home run. That's just the rule. So there are rules inside of the juvenile dependency courts that they must follow. And in California, it's called the Welfare and Institutions Code.
Mhm.
So they have to follow that. So that's why
I'm
you have
gonna
these
I'm
six
gonna
month
send you
gaps.
a map, like a map where it says the court, what happens when they take your kid. I'm gonna send it to you. Maybe your producer can put it up next time or something. But it's it's a little layout of juvenile dependency proceedings, and so it lays it out for you. I'm gonna send it to you right now, text message. But there's a lot of stuff in there that you don't know about as a parent. You don't know because I didn't know why is there a 6-month hearing and why is there a 12-month. There and you have to get your services done before then.
You know what? I'm going to tell you something. I wrote a book for parents,
Mhm,
and it explains all of the things that you're asking, some of the general things.
mhm.
You've never been involved in a CPS case. You think you might know some stuff, but you really not sure. What I suggest is you find my book online and find a free copy of it. You can buy it on Amazon, but read that book. It's only 70 pages if you want to educate yourself about the framework of the system. A lot of people go in these cases, they don't even understand the framework. How
Nobody's
are they?
telling you neither. No one's gonna
Right.
tell you.
So, how are
Mhm,
you ever going to win?
mhm.
How are you ever going to win? You don't understand the rules. You don't understand the game. You don't understand anything.
Nope.
And then you
Now
just expect, well, no, this is important. You
no, yeah.
just expect because you're right in your heart that justice will prevail and God will do the right thing. And I'm sorry to say that doesn't always happen.
So in the beginning, when they take your child, they have what is it, 48 hours to come up
48
with
to
something?
48 to 72 hours to have a hearing.
Uh-huh.
But since COVID and in California, we're still in the COVID emergency, they
Mhm.
extended that. I think they extended it to like a week, right? But
So if they don't, is that something that you can get your kid back from?
no, no. So there's just this rule, and this
Mhm.
happens in all areas of law. They make a rule,
Yeah,
and then when it's violated, nothing happens.
right,
People think, well, if there's a rule and it's violated, then I should win.
right.
That's the rule generally in criminal court.
Okay.
It's not the rule in all the other courts, right?
Right,
There's
well, mine was
juvenile
a
court.
month. I waited a month.
Yeah, I think that it's even extended because in your case, when the child was taken from you, it was placed with the father. So
Mhm.
that gives them a little more time, but
That
it
was my
doesn't
next
give them a
question.
month. It
No, but,
doesn't give them a month.
so it's different if it's placed with family versus foster, right?
Correct. No, 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 no. It's different if it's placed with another parent
Okay.
or someplace else.
Okay.
So if your kid had been placed with your mother,
Right.
you still are entitled to 48 to 72 hours.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I haven't looked at this in a long time. The law actually says, I don't know if it says 48 to 72 hours. I actually think it says 48 hours. And then by case law in California, they've extended it to 72 hours. And
Um,
how that happened, I don't know.
I was gonna say, what's the difference with the 48 and the 72? Like, it doesn't seem like it would be that much of a different for them to come up with something. It's not that much more time. I mean, it's a lot of time for your child who's been detained.
Right. Well, you know what? I think I've mentioned this to you a long time ago. Everybody has an agenda in these cases.
Right.
Your agenda is not the agenda of the necessarily of the social worker. Your
Right.
agenda is not necessarily the agenda of the court. Your agenda is not necessarily the agenda of the minor's attorney. Your agenda is not the agenda of the father's attorney, right?
Can you explain why it's not a good idea to talk to minors counsel? A lot of people are like, I want to talk to minors counsel. They never talk to me. Can you explain why you suggest to your clients that they do not talk with minors counsel?
Yeah, because minors counsel are basically, in my humble opinion, extensions of the social worker in a
Hmm.
lot of cases. Now, don't get me wrong. Are there good minors counsel out there? Yes. Okay, I'm not saying all minors counsel are bad, but just to be safe, don't talk to attorneys who could use that conversation against you. If the police come to you and say, "Hey, Aaron, did you rob the bank last night?" You probably should lawyer up whether you did it or not and say, "Hey,
Right.
you know, I'll talk to you when my attorney is present."
Mhm.
It's the same thing. Social workers are just like policemen, except for they don't have guns. Every
No,
once in a
but they
while,
they don't have they are trained in interrogation, but not in investigation. So they're trained on how to get information out of you and your kid, but they're not trained how to do it properly because they need is just one thing and right.
yep. So I forgot the question, but I
I
hope I
don't
answered
remember.
it. I hope
Oh,
I answered it.
another
But
question.
why you shouldn't talk to minors
Yes,
counsel.
that's right. Um, and because a lot of people think, oh, well, they're just going to side with the other parent because they no, don't talk to the like, don't talk to your social worker. Do it through email or whatever. How are they supposed to substantiate allegations?
They're supposed to do investigation and interviews.
Okay,
They
so
should
if the
march.
person that called on you, so my husband Mario called on me, and they substantiated my allegations by asking him if he agreed. Is that allowed?
Yes, it is.
So the
Now, don't.
person making the allegations can say, "Yeah, I agree with them. Those are yep, that's it."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now
It's
you
so
have the right
confusing.
to present evidence to show that that's different.
Mhm.
And I know your attorney. We said your attorney did a good job in your case, and I would say
Mhm.
that she did. Your
Yeah.
court appointed attorney, but I would have handled the case differently.
Mhm. I
But
had to
that's
refocus
why
her.
yeah, that's why they call it the practice of law, because people do things differently.
Mhm.
People have different agendas, right? So hey, you know what? We're past the hour mark, and Aaron, I want to thank you for being on this evening.
Thank you for
Um,
having me. Like old times.
Definitely. I've told people that for the next period of time, I'm gonna start doing these shows live. So I'm gonna, again, I'm gonna try to do these shows live every evening at 7 p.m. So if you're watching tonight and you want to tell your friends about tomorrow night, God willing, I'll be on the show. I'll be doing a show tomorrow night. You guys can watch and post your questions, and I may have a guest tomorrow night. Um, so tomorrow at 7, we'll see you then. Again, thank you, Miss Carranza. I
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.